of agriculture in Maine, blueberries and maple syrup probably come to mind, right? But federal officials say the state is also a hotbed for illegal marijuana farms.
An investigation by the Maine Wire revealed that there's more than 100 of them in the state on mostly residential properties.
Honored to have Steve Robinson, editor-in-chief of the Maine Wire, that has an incredible investigative report out.
Editor of the Maine Wire, Steve Robinson, tracks suspected illegal grows.
They're not paying taxes. They're operating completely off the radar.
Would China allow Americans, especially Americans who are living in their country illegally, to buy up homes and land with questionably sourced funding to convert those properties into massive illicit marijuana farms, of which billions of dollars are made?
This is an amazing story. I think this is an extraordinary story, an extraordinary piece of journalism that Steve Robinson has done.
I'm gonna tell you a story, and it's gonna sound crazy, but the longer I talk, the more it's gonna make sense, and the more you'll come to understand that what I'm saying is true. The Chinese Mafia have taken over rural Maine. In September of 2022, a reporter named Jenny Tare from the Daily Caller News Foundation posted a leaked memo that said that there were 270 of these illegal Chinese marijuana facilities in the state of Maine. It caught my eye. I thought it was remarkable. Growing up in rural Maine, I said, well, I mean, if there's 270 of these places and they're growing thousands and thousands of pot plants, I should be able to find them. And I did. Here at one of these grow houses in Rumford, Maine, reeks of marijuana. All right, we're at Smith Road in New Sharon. House reeks of pot. Neighbors say it reeks of pot. Chinese couple coming going. Windows all boarded up. There we go. Jackpot. Four. Count them, 4 heat pumps. This is 442 Estes Avenue, Palmyra. Strong odor of pot here. Did this used to be a nursing home?
Before, yeah.
Before? Yeah. Is it a commercial marijuana grow or just a recreational?
They just regular.
Just regular grow? Okay. I'm here at 56 Pine Street in Mexico, Maine. What makes this site especially illegal is the fact that immediately to my left, there is a daycare. Over the last 2 months, we have personally visited 200 illegal Chinese-owned marijuana growing locations in rural Maine. Some of them have been disrupted by law enforcement. Some of them are active. And it's not just marijuana that they're into. There are seemingly legitimate businesses that they control, restaurants. There are boarding houses throughout the state where the workers sleep, eat, and shit. And then there are some sites that are distinctly militaristic. You know, your hair stands up on end when you go past them. We pulled the property records and developed an understanding of who was owning these properties, how they were buying these properties, and we discovered a couple of patterns based on that partial list from the Department of Homeland Security that allowed us to really unravel the plot. In the poor rural counties of Maine, these properties are just everywhere, and it's just fucking mind-boggling to me that there aren't more people in the state concerned. These guys think that they're gonna come into Maine, our home state, break all our laws, poison our weed, poison the environment. My message to them, if they're watching, is a simple one. Fuck you. War. We're here in Portland, Maine. It's Maine's largest city, really the center of wealth and economic value in the state. Very liberal. I can tell you, the people behind me probably can't find Wilton on a map. They probably couldn't even find Carmel. You know, they don't know where Mattawamkeag is, and I don't know if they even care about it. The problem isn't right in their face. They're smoking a lot of pot around here, but I don't know if they're worried that much about the illegal Chinese-grown marijuana. About 2 miles that way, under the Casco Bridge, there's a homeless encampment of about 300 people. And one of the primary causes of that camp being there is narcotics trafficking, fentanyl, which we know that the Chinese organized crime operations are into heavily. So time will tell, I guess, if the politicians who live here and the people who live here will have the backs of the people in rural Maine who are really struggling to get by. Triad Weed 101. How to identify a triad cannabis grow in your neck of the woods. All the windows of these properties will be boarded up, usually with a foil-faced insulation, blankets from Oklahoma State. The second sign is heat pumps. Way more than any Mainer would install on their home. Way more than even makes sense from a physics standpoint. Massive amounts of electricity, commercial scale electricity. There'll be somewhere between 8 and a dozen security cameras all over the property. You'll be able to smell the cannabis from a mile away. If it smells like there's a bunch of skunks having an orgy in the mobile home next door, it's probably a cannabis grow. They won't really care how it looks from the outside. They won't mow the lawn, but they will pay very careful attention to ensuring that a U-Haul truck, a Ford Transit van, or a Sprinter van can arrive from Massachusetts or New York and not have to worry about the snow. See, from this property behind me, the telltale signs of the place where I grew up. The Triad Weed story is a personal one for me because when I first started digging around back in my hometown in Dexter, I quickly discovered that there was a illegal marijuana grow next to my high school basketball coach's house. There's an illegal marijuana grow at the top of my camp road. Illegal marijuana grow on my dad's road. The guy who knocked up my high school girlfriend, he's got an illegal marijuana grow next to him. But they really crossed the line because just about less than a mile that way, there's an illegal marijuana grow that the governor's brother, Paul Mills, transferred to the ownership of a Chinese national. And this is a sacred site. This is where Steve Robinson and his high school buddies first got bombed on Bagwine and Zima. Right there at that bonfire, there should be a monument up. The governor's brother was paid to help facilitate a transaction on behalf of Chinese national drug traffickers. Indisputably, based on the public records. And no other media outlet in the state will talk about it. Steve Robinson, editor-in-chief of the Maine Wire, here on the scene in beautiful Corinna, Maine. As the direct result of our reporting and our unwillingness to look away from the problem, there have been an increasing number of raids on these properties.
I hear a noise in the back. Sheriff's office! Come out with your hands up! We know you're up there, come out!
One of those properties was in Corinna, Maine, where my mom grew up, right next to the town office. You won't believe me, but when I was a kid, this entire skyline would have been blotted out by a big woolen mill that just polluted the shit out of the entire river, caused a lot of problems. It was actually a super fun site for most of my childhood, but now that it's been torn down, I can actually see the church right in downtown Corinna, where my brother got married to his first wife, and where my Grammy Hartley used to go to church for the longest time. So as I'm poking around the Corinna area and preparing to do some of our first public reporting, I just stumbled on this property record related to a location, 51 Cider Hill Road in Corinna, right on the Exeter town line. The property behind me, 9 St. Albans Road, was recently raided in February. A couple of other properties nearby also raided, thought to be part of a vast operation covering the state. 13 days later, there was a property transfer initiated for a location about 5 miles that away. What really caught my eye about this one, in addition to the idea of a property in central Maine being transferred into the custody of a Chinese foreign national with no real estate taxes paid, no capital gains taxes paid, was that the attorney who facilitated that transfer was a guy named Paul Mills, who supplied an address of 163 Main Street in Farmington. That just so happens to be the address of a law office in Farmington, Mills & Mills, which is run by Paul Mills, the oldest brother of the governor of Maine, Janet Mills. Very interesting development here. The question, of course, is why is Paul Mills, an established attorney, an elderly man, helping the operators and owners of an illegal marijuana cultivation site 13 days after a raid at a separate property 5 miles away? The only way really to elucidate what's going on here, I think, is going to be to go ask Paul Mills and his little sis, Governor Janet Mills, some questions.
Okay, sure.
I wonder if you have a moment to talk about that property in Corona.
Not at the moment. No, right
No?
now. Fine, the next room. Thank you.
Okay, well, do you have time later if we wait around?
Not today. No, I'm
Not
sorry.
today? Okay, we'll wait around for you. Paul Mills doesn't have time to talk. He's a very, very busy man. That is a fucking sensational story. That's insane. It's the biggest, most important story in the state of Maine, in my opinion. We printed up copies of the real estate transfer document and handed them out to other media outlets at the State House and lawmakers and left them sitting around the lobby area from where the governor was hiding and wouldn't come out and talk about it.
Governor, what do you think are the national security implications of the huge number of illegal Chinese-operated marijuana grow sites in Maine?
I don't think that question relates to this project today. Thank you.
Governor Mills has yet to utter a single word publicly about the vast criminal conspiracy undermining the quality of life in rural Maine.
As Maine goes, so will go the nation!
Which developed entirely under her tenure. All right, we're here at the State House in Augusta. Governor Mills won't respond to any of my emails about this stuff, so we're gonna pop in and see if she's available for an interview. Hi, Steve Robinson from the Maine Wire. I'm wondering if someone from the Mills administration is available to talk about the Chinese-owned marijuana grows. Great, thank you. As you can see, who's around. It's been about 5 minutes since we panicked the governor's press person into scurrying into her office. Someone might come out and talk with us. Who knows?
Folks are in meetings right now, and I'm happy to let them know that you were here. Okay. Offer if you have a card.
You guys don't respond to any of my emails.
Well, I'll let folks know that you came by.
Okay.
Perfect. Appreciate it.
I'll know you guys called on the phone, doesn't it? The Mills administration doesn't respond to any of the Maine Wire's inquiries about anything. They haven't responded to any of our inquiries about these sites. We've offered the Maine State Police a briefing to share the information, the properties that we have. Offered it to Scott Ogden, her deputy chief of staff. He didn't respond to me at all. They just don't interact with people. When national media shows up and actually asks hard questions, they tend to crumble because they weren't going to take this access journalism bullshit on the chin. But the Bangor Daily News, the Press Herald, the TV outlets, they all rely on access to the Mills administration in order to do their jobs. So they play nice. They don't ask hard questions. That's what you get. Eventually, if you jump up and down and wave your arms around enough and make a scene, some politicians will start to pay attention. Senator Angus King is not very concerned with this issue. Representative Shelley Pingree, not so much. Representative Golden, whose district pretty much all of these operations are occurring in, has signed some letters or something, but he won't talk to me about it, and he's declined my invitation to go visit some of these properties. Senator Susan Collins has been very aggressive on this topic. Senator Collins has really spearheaded the effort of Maine's congressional delegation to get federal law enforcement interested in fighting Chinese mafia in the state of Maine.
I first learned about this problem 2 years ago when a former staffer of mine who lives in Winterport called to tell me about a house down the road that mysteriously had burned down.
169 Baker Road.
There you go. You really do know. And it was due to illegal overuse of the wiring that was in the house.
It's very obvious when you look at the house.
And that's when I first heard it.
But I think I have a clue as to where this fire started. So people who live in the area gave us some pictures of firefighters responding to it. Nobody was home at the time, apparently. And shortly after the place caught fire, there's this fantastic picture that somebody gave us of a bunch of Chinese guys standing around smoking cigarettes in tracksuits. I mean, it could not be more stereotypical, triad gangster than that. But this is a good example, maybe an extreme example of what's happening to the housing stock in Maine. When I visit some of these properties based on tips from law enforcement or power company employees or just Maine Wire readers, one of the first things I do is go and talk with neighbors to the property, because they're oftentimes your best sources, your best witnesses, and they've seen what's going on. And I have to say, the people of rural Maine are terrified. They are terrified, especially now that they know that they're dealing with a criminal organization rather than just some plucky, people from New York who moved up and decided to bend the law. So what more do you think that local, state, federal law enforcement could be doing to protect the Maine way of life?
We need an all-hands-on-deck approach to this problem, and it is a serious problem. I, too, have talked to neighbors of these houses, and first of all, they don't want a drug organization operating right down the road from them. And second, they do know that these are criminals. They're breaking the law. And third, the fact that it has this link to transnational criminal organizations connected to China is frightening. Why are the Chinese doing this is a question that I keep getting. There's also a practical aspect of this. These growing operations in these homes are destroying these houses.
Absolutely.
They are full of black mold. They are extremely dangerous to one's health, and they will never be usable as houses again at a time when our state has a severe shortage of affordable housing.
Yeah, fewer than any time in my lifetime.
Same with me. So I think that that's part of it as well. And I've continued to pressure federal officials, including the Attorney General, the head of DEA, who was the most cooperative, the Secretary of State, the head of the FBI. I have raised it at public hearings over and over again. That's how serious I think this problem is.
This is a no longer an active marijuana grow, but it was one of the bigger ones. Well over 3,000 plants were taken out of these buildings over here. And one of the interesting things you can see here is the power equipment that was left behind, which shows that there's a lot of carpentry involved and some tradecraft in putting together a marijuana grow. You see these big CO2 tanks. That's the alternative to just burning propane. It's a little bit safer. A source gave us some information about a shipment that this place received from a company in Las Vegas that makes something called the Triminator. And it can process just a remarkable amount of bud, like hundreds of pounds in an hour, which is way beyond the capacity of what a medicinal caregiver or even a tier 1, 2, 3 grow would really need. It is labor intensive to process all that weed. So you can see why the Triminator would come in handy.
Oh my God, look at them. Oh, shivered.
And they install them themselves too.
Probably 3 different times during the day in the summer. They would, about 4 guys would be here, and they would carry out like a white chest. One on one side, one on the other side. And I said to my husband, "They're moving bodies?" But a white chest.
Huh.
One would carry it out, and the other would be like this, and they'd come over here. Because I couldn't see now.
Probably bud,
That's what my guess
yeah. Product from the Triminator.
I mean, if I like to grow that many, you think I'd be standing here right now?
No. All right, we're here in Dexter, Maine, my hometown.
So they would back up.
Oh yeah, that's pretty convenient, right? Yeah.
And they had these, there was some cats in view.
They had all the windows blocked.
There was marijuana being grown in every single room of this house except for one, and that's where the individual lived.
But they had all these windows blacked out, and they would back the truck up, close the doors as fast as they could. They would load up. It was always from New York.
Still, even here, there's still sticky stuff. Everything has stickers on it.
Oh, yeah.
Everywhere there was lights, there's stickers, and we're still trying to get all that stuff out. But go ahead in there, you'll see.
They cut big foot in diameter holes in every floor so that they could install ventilation to get the heat out and the smell. And the house also has in one of those old 1970s internal vacuum systems, and they use that for some aspect of the marijuana processing. And so the entire inside of that tube is just coated with trichromes, with marijuana crystals. So the house is going to smell forever like weed until he gets that vacuum system out.
And they saved all of the cutouts.
Oh, they saved them so you can
Put them back in. It's really
Everything,
that's
yeah, they saved it, and then they would vent everything through the attic. That's where they were venting everything from.
Oh, yeah.
That's not necessary for this house.
When they moved in, there were 25 motion-activated night lights plugged into the outlets. So whoever was here working, tending to the plants, was afraid to flick the light switches and instead just used little, very dim lights. But this is one of 8 in Dexter, a town of 3,500 people. You showed up and told him his stuff was out of code.
Yeah.
And then what happened the following day?
No, the same at the same exact time. I told him his stuff was out of code, and I told him I was a code enforcement officer.
Mm-hmm.
Because nobody in town's I've been hearing about this place and hearing about it, and nobody's doing anything about it.
Mm-hmm.
So I said, well, I'm pissed, and not in my small town, damn it.
Mm-hmm.
So I came over here, and his rig was here, and I backed in and I tooted the horn and told them I had walked around the place and it wasn't up to code. And I said, you got a week to either bring the place up to code or I'm going to close you down.
Probably booby-trapped with the COVID.
And I gave them my phone number. And a week later, they called me when they were supposed to close the place down and asked me if I was interested in a financial agreement.
Something I hear a lot from people is, who cares? It's just weed. What do you care? The harm that these operations are causing to the state of Maine is very real and very severe, even if people don't immediately understand what's happening.
But I don't know where I'm going, no. I just know it's without you. It's been a while since you left, and now my trouble.
It's a little before 4 o'clock in the morning, and getting ready to set out from Mid-Coast Maine. Busy day ahead of us. Got to get up to Mattawamkeag, where some sources have told me that the Chinese Mafia bought an old middle school. A big part of this story, from my perspective, is the parallel between the economic collapse and destitution of rural Maine, where I grew up, side by side with these criminal organizations that seem to be prospering. All right, we're here at what used to be Ideal Recycling. It's not just residential properties. All right, here at 249 Wynn Road, and this is a facility that was purchased by some Chinese guys from out of state and used to be a church. The Chinese Mafia are buying up churches, schools, old sardine canneries, recycling facilities, nursing homes, massively upgraded electricity use. And this place used to actually be a nursing home. Old mill buildings in Lewiston. It has all the telltale signs of what we see with residential properties that have been converted to illegal marijuana grows. Flight hangars. Anywhere there's a big room and access to commercial grade electricity, they are buying it, and they're growing huge amounts of weed to enrich themselves, and some of that money is going back to the People's Republic of China. All right, we are in Mattawamkeag, Maine. This is a property that I've wanted to visit for a while now. As you can see behind me, this is the location formerly of the Dr. Carl Trout K-5 Elementary School. Looks like it's been a while since this area has known economic prosperity. I'm looking right now at PJ's liquor store. Doesn't even look like the liquor. Doesn't even look like the liquor store is still in business. I don't know how you go out of business selling liquor in northern Maine. We we outsourced all of the mill jobs and insourced all of the illegal marijuana growing. So you can see windows boarded up with what appears to be some kind of foam or insulation. Windows upstairs boarded up. You can see a heat pump installed on the side there. Looks like a fucking horde of zombies came over here and just ravaged this place. No signs of life outside, except for out back. Looks like we got some ducks. Under Maine law, you are required to have a certified master electrician sign off on any power entrance over 400 amps. It's commercial grade power. Because that creates a public record, we're able to go through and see that one guy kept popping up at a lot of these installs. There was one master electrician who was doing work almost exclusively for the Chinese Mafia. And his name was J. Martin Vachon. Marty is kind of like the vermin supreme of Maine.
Vermin Supreme will take away your guns and give you better ones.
Marty's been running for governor, since before I was born, with these odd duck candidacies. One day I decided I would just give Marty a call and say, hey, what's going on here? Because it really looks like in 2020 you just started doing work exclusively for the Chinese Mafia. Do you know what you're engaged in? And oh boy, did I hook into a great phone call with that one.
You're with Maine Wire.
Yes.
What is that?
The Maine Wire, we're a news outlet. I'm an investigative
reporter. We do have a lot to talk about then. I help these people try to maintain whatever privacy they want. They want electricity. I try to help them get it. If it's required, if it comes out as a cannabis cultivation facility, yes, my name will appear. Yes. These Chinese people are hard-working people. They saw an opportunity to make a buck, and they're trying to.
And so I asked Marty, what about the school up in Mattawamkeag? They're going to be growing a bunch of pot there, right? He said, they're not growing any pot there. I said, well, how do you know that, Marty? And he said, well, because I live there. Okay. And do these gentlemen, do they pay a premium for your services? I know it's sometimes.
I gave me a place. I'm homeless actually, and they've just been very kind to me and given me a place to stay. And I consider what I do just clearing cobwebs for them.
Who is giving you a place to stay?
The Chinese people.
Is Tong the guy who owns the middle school in Mattawamkeag?
His sister does.
His sister owns that school? Okay. And they're growing marijuana there?
What makes you think that?
Just because it smells like it outside of it.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, well, you never know. That's my address where I live. That's my home.
Oh, you live up at that school?
Yeah.
Oh, interesting. You're the only one there?
Oh, his cousins stay over occasionally.
Cousins, okay. Yeah. Interesting. So that's kind of like your base of operations. You go out and do the electrical work, but kind of live in Mattawamkeag?
I want in that Mattawamkeag school, when I get my mailbox up and printed up, it'll have Alice Chinese Cultural Exchange on it. And Marty Vachon for governor.
So you guys are going to open up like a school or something there?
The Chinese want to hide. The front man.
He explained to me that, he'd had a couple of girlfriends and wives that didn't do well in nursing homes. He has reasoned that he's better off living with the Chinese Mafia and helping them get power for their marijuana grows than he is in a nursing home. He might be right. But there's no question that the Chinese Mafia are taking advantage of Marty. Marty Vachon swears up and down that he never helped anyone bypass their meter to steal electricity. But on one occasion, he did recall that one of these tamper tags that the power company puts on was bit off by a dog. And so he had to go fix it up for his Chinese marijuana growing friends. Bit off by a dog. Well, this is some Marty Vachon handiwork for sure. Seems to be an awful lot of flies buzzing around it, so I hope our friend Marty is not tucked away in there somewhere. Marty's adopted son is a guy named Tong Q Liu. Tong is now the owner of China Walk on Broadway in Bangor. Marty's story was so incredible and so unbelievable that I found myself at times wondering if he was like pre-Alzheimer's or something and was just crazy, and I just wasted an hour of my life talking with a brain-addled old fool. But there was enough that he was saying that made a lot of sense and matched up with the records that I was looking at. I knew that I needed to follow up on this a little bit and at least confirm, that there was some kind of a relationship between Marty and Tong Liu. So I went to China Walk. Hi, I'm looking for Tom.
Tom?
Is he around?
Yeah.
Could you talk?
Okay, 1 second.
Hi, are you Tom?
Yes.
Hi, Tom. I'm looking for Martin Vachon.
What's that?
I'm looking for Martin Vachon. Marty?
Marty?
Yeah, I'm looking for Marty. Do you know where he is?
Who are you looking for?
Marty.
I know. Who is it?
Yeah, Marty Vachon. Some of his family are concerned about him. They said they haven't seen him for a while.
What's that?
Some of his family, his kids, said they haven't seen him for a while. Do you know where he might be?
Marty?
Yeah, Marty.
I see him every minute.
Do you know if he's in contact with his family?
You family? You Marty family?
His family have asked me to look into his whereabouts. He stopped picking up the phone after I talked to him.
No, you have to. You can please by please.
Does he live right here?
No, we don't live here. You know
Marty! Hey,
He's
Marty.
looking for you. Huh? He's looking
Marty,
for
it's
you.
Steve Robinson. We talked on the phone a little while ago.
Yeah.
You haven't picked up my phone calls since we talked. I was just looking for you. I talked with some of your family, and they were a little concerned about you. That's all.
Oh, Marty, my son?
Yeah.
I haven't talked to him for a couple of days.
Yeah.
I'll call him.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm sorry. I'm sorry if I worried him. I asked if he talked with you, and he said he hadn't heard from you.
Like 3-4 days ago, his phone dead. That's why.
Okay.
You don't call my brother?
I haven't talked to him.
Come on. He's got phone 2 days ready.
He's got a woman now that's very busy. So
Yeah.
Steve Robinson.
Yeah. At some point in time, Tong himself became certified as an electrician's helper. We are here in lovely, foggy Machias, Maine, in Washington County, one of the easternmost cities in the state of Maine, cities if you want to call it that. People who are familiar with Marty and Tong and their work say that they show up at a property and Marty will liaise with the power company. He'll, jawbone the code enforcement officers to try to get the electricity hooked up. But it's Tong who's doing all the work.
Initial drive-by, we saw the 400 amp service on the side of the barn. Strong smell of marijuana coming from the area. So from there, we pulled some power records and saw that they were using 10,000 watts a month.
I'd started talking to Marty right after the Machias Police Department raided a facility on East Kennebec Road. Grow operation that had been built out of an old farmhouse. Beautiful, beautiful place looking out over the water. But there's a barn, a garage, a couple of different places there that had just been converted into grow rooms. I think this place had 12 grow rooms. But one of the things that really stuck out to me about that property is that they had figured out how to jump the meter. This breaker box, according to the electrical company, somebody who knew what they were doing jerry-rigged this breaker box so that they could steal power. You see right there, those are your two 200 amp circuit breakers. Massive, massive wires. And even sometimes that's not enough power, though. They'll melt those. This is another one. Danger diversion. There's no power to it now, but somebody who knew exactly what they were doing figured out how to get around the meter. With fungicide, they're gonna be able to have kids. Versant, the power company that supplies this area, they don't even know how many tens of thousands of dollars in electricity these guys were stealing. We're here in Eastport, Maine, where the Triad Weed Trail has led us, because we think that this might have been really where it all started. One of the first Triad weed operators was a guy named Jimmy Wong. Jimmy is 72 years old and lives in New York City right now. In 2014, Jimmy came to the state of Maine with his business partner, George Klapishak. They convinced the administration of Governor Paul LePage that they were here with a bright plan. They were going to save the seafood industry in Maine. With help from the Department of Economic and Community Development, Jimmy Wong and George Klapishak were able to acquire a old sardine cannery in Eastport, Maine. The promise was always that they were going to flash freeze lobsters and sell them to Asian markets, to seafood restaurants in New York, all over the world. There was a lot of promise here, a lot of promises made, and none of them were kept. Jimmy Wong may have bought a few lobsters, but eventually he got into glass eels, or elvers. Then he was buying sea cucumbers. Then he was buying urchin, and there was always some kind of story as to how Jimmy Wong was making money at that old sardine cannery in Eastport. Jimmy became somewhat infamous in the town of Eastport. Everyone would see him coming and going, walking, because apparently he couldn't afford his own car. He really seemed to be like the local village idiot. Little did they know, Jimmy had them all conned. So I'm not like an FBI investigator, but the fact that what they used to block out the light and any unwanted witnesses from this window right here is an Oklahoma State picnic blanket of some kind. That sets off some alarm bells for me, because we know that Oklahoma is one of the states that, probably more so than Maine, has an illegal Chinese marijuana problem. Now, a normal person who hasn't been chasing triad weed across the state of Maine might ask themselves, why would you chop a hole in the side of a perfectly good building like this? As you can see, there are dozens of holes chopped all through this building, seemingly at random. Those would have been used for ventilation to help control the temperature and the humidity of the grow rooms that were built in this area. And if you can see here, there are remnants of what was clearly a hastily installed, not a very professional job to bring power to all of the outlets. This is wildly dangerous because this place was dealing with 3-phase power plus a 1-phase entrance. It was near the end of 2021 when the owner of the property learned that Jimmy Wong was way behind on all of his bills, hadn't paid the electricity bill, the sewage bill, his property taxes, and this entire property was on the verge of foreclosure. That's when he bought the mortgage back and began to unravel what exactly had happened to his property. What had Jimmy Wong done?
I went up there in August the year before last. I was told by the neighbor, that lives right across the street, literally 40 feet. They got a front porch, just looks at the back of the building, the main entrance. And they told me they thought Jimmy Wong was killed in the building because they've been seeing all these gangs, these big black SUVs showing up 2 or 3 in a row, filled with Chinese guys wearing shiny suits and tattoos on their necks and faces and everything. And they said if they weren't
when he showed up here to inspect the property in person for the first time in a long time, what he encountered was a horrifying scene.
Unplug these daisy-chained outlets. Holy shit. Jury-rigged. See all the reflective material on the walls for accumulating more of the light. Looks like marijuana to me.
As beautiful as this view is, right out over the Lubeck Narrows into Campobello Island, the sad truth is that this location played host to one of the biggest human trafficking operations that we've encountered as we've investigated triad weed here in the state of Maine.
Mattresses. Yeah. The little shoes.
Yeah. What size? If they fit.
No.
All right. Let's get some fresh air. Come on.
If you look at the mattresses and the living accommodations that the owner photographed when he walked in, you can tell that 10, maybe 20 individuals were being kept here. The locals never saw them outside unless they were on that deck right there, fishing for food and even trying to catch seagulls to eat.
You see how they sectioned off the whole wall here. Normally this should be completely open, trusses. Behind all these blankets are all the windows. Open the window, let's get some fresh air, much needed fresh air. Dear God, absolutely no respect for anything. Sheer incredible. Going back up front, there are the stairs out front of the building. Little other spaces downstairs. Little bedroom stuff, their storage. Woohoo.
This place had slaves. There's really no there's no politically correct way to put it. The property had 10 surveillance cameras. One of them was pointed out at the water, and the other on the driveway. The rest of them were on the workers. A little bit of lead paint. It's good for you. This is the parking lot of the Eastport Port Authority, but there's also an office of the U.S. Customs and Border Protection right there. It's rather astonishing that one of the largest human trafficking operations we've encountered was operating right under the noses of CBP. Did you guys know Jimmy Wong at all? No. Really? You look like you might have known something about it. So one of the things I was trying to understand when I got into this investigation was, where are they selling this marijuana? So we would talk with legal cannabis businesses and try to figure out, so, okay, they're growing it, we know where they're growing it, and we know who's buying the properties, and we know who's there, but how are they turning the sticky icky into cold hard cash? And one name kept popping up when we would talk with legal operators, and that name was Johnny Wu. We're here at 128 Weld Road in Wilton, Maine, at the site of the old Bass Shoe Factory. This was busted by the Wilton Police Department last week. There's a big grow in Wilton, Maine. Johnny Wu was the business manager at that facility. Johnny Wu was able to get his caregiver's license through the Office of Cannabis Policy. He was one of the rare Chinese Mafia operators that actually attempted to engage with the regulatory system. Johnny is an important piece of the triad weed puzzle because in order to make money here locally in the state, in order to take your triad weed and sell it into the unregulated or less regulated medical markets, you need somebody with that caregiver card just to give the pretense that what you're doing is legal.
Excuse me, sir. Would you be able to give us an interview? No English? Okay, sorry. Do you work here? You do? Are you guys still growing?
We went to the Wilton Town office and talked with the code enforcement officer there, and he was very familiar with Johnny Wu.
Johnny Wu was the one that first brought it to us in March. He's got quite the reputation.
Yeah, it does. Today we got our first confirmation that OCP has told municipal employees in at least a few towns that if Johnny Wu is involved in a project, they're to contact the authorities immediately.
Yeah, what beyond dealing with him yourself, what have you heard about Johnny?
Johnny, I have heard to notify the OCP if there's any contact from us.
Really?
Yes.
From OCP?
Yes.
Yeah.
Johnny Wu lost his marijuana license.
Do you have any insight as to why Johnny lost his license?
I think his plant count was off several times, and they just had enough.
There's still a marijuana grow here happening, supposedly licensed, but two license plates from New York City right there.
Just one comment while I have you here. These people, when I knocked on the door, they said, "Oh, hold on a second," and they called Johnny. Had me talk to Johnny, and
so he's still involved.
He's still involved, yeah.
This facility right behind me is licensed under a man named Johnny Wu, who is the Johnny Wu. Johnny Wu got approval for a big marijuana facility in Gardner. This facility was originally a meat locker, very stereotypical Mafia shit. Not a meat locker anymore. Continues to be an active marijuana grow to this day. You can hear the burners going to supply CO2 for the plants, and those heat pumps are spinning away. So somebody is still growing a lot of marijuana there. It does smell like weed here, and when you're hot on the trail of Johnny Wu, it's going to smell like weed. He was also involved with properties in Dexter, Mexico, Maine, Turner, Maine, Lewiston, Maine, and he also had a business partner who went by the name of Jason Tsai. Johnny Wu and Jason Tsai are kind of like the southern Maine bosses of the Chinese Mafia. In a once prosperous Lewiston, Maine, you have to join me, use your imagination a little bit here, but in a once prosperous Lewiston, Maine, this entire building was actually one unified factory. This section that you see going this way is now owned by Martin's, which is obviously the superior brand to Rennie's. This little outcrop of building right here, and everything from the elbow down to the right is owned currently by a company called Green Harvest LLC. Green Harvest LLC was incorporated in Maine by a guy named Jason Tsai. Jason was a real go-getter. He told a local building contractor that was trying to help him convert this into a marijuana grow that he came here quite recently from the People's Republic of China, where he was formerly employed as an organ harvester for the CCP.
All of a sudden, he started just telling us that he was an organ harvester. He harvested kidneys for the in China for the government, and it was more in the 90s, late 90s. And so he was explaining when they would shoot people, they had teams of people that would do organ harvest, kidney, skin, eyes, liver, the whole thing.
So keep your head on a swivel because it's 12 Nelke, but they might also own 8 Nelke. We're going to the place that is listed on the main driver's license of Johnny Wu. Nope, I do not think anyone's home. So talk to this guy, though. I know this is a crappy photo, but you've never seen this guy?
Oh, yes.
You have seen him?
Oh, I remember random cars pulling out.
Mass plates, New York plates. Yeah.
And I did a lot of grow facilities in the area. So I went over to look at it, and it just wasn't, they wanted us to use their stuff, kind of limit.
What do you mean their stuff?
Well, cameras, they were providing the equipment and stuff.
Oh, fresh out of China?
Yeah.
You know what town it was in?
Turner.
So when Jason originally purchased this, it was under a company called Green Futures LLC. Later it was transferred for reasons that aren't clear to me right at the moment to Blue Future Corporation, but same principles involved. And they are also connected to a company in Turner, Maine on the Connaught Road right next to the regional airport. And we know now after visiting 12 Nelke Place in Lewiston, the owner of this building is in business with the owner of the meat locker that we just visited, Johnny Wu, who we also know blacklisted by the Office of Cannabis Policy. So the
players at the higher level are starting to fall together a little bit. I don't know, they broke into my country. Can I break into their fucking illegal pot grow? So the trail of both Johnny Wu and Jason Tsai brings us here, right next to the abandoned Twitchell Airport. And the facility that you see behind me was an attempt by a company called Green Futures LLC to have a legal regulated grow. I mean, you can tell massive, massive grow.
We went and scoped it out ourselves, and lo and behold, we find that these guys were in such a hurry to leave, they abandoned 40 huge trash bags full of pot.
We call that triad weed. Wonder why they need refrigerating units on those campers. Trailers, rather. Oh, you know what? They were growing in them. See, they're connected. This could have been their drying facility. Making so much fucking money that they can just leave huge bags of product behind.
Jason Tsai, when he showed up in Maine, took a keen interest in this very nice house on the Androscoggin River in Green, Maine. And the house wasn't for sale, but you know, if the briefcase full of cash is big enough, everything's for sale. Jason Tsai buys this property from a guy who happens to be a HVAC contractor. Some individuals came from New York and made him an offer for his house. It wasn't on the market, but it was an offer he couldn't refuse, and so he ended up selling his house. So it's a beautiful, modern-looking house right on the Androscoggin River. It doesn't make sense to be a marijuana grow, but it could be a headquarters of some kind. Over the course of about 2 years, the contractor does a little bit of business with Jason and has extensive interactions with him. And from his, I guess from what he's told us, it seemed like Jason was trying to befriend him. The building contractor meets up with Jason, and Jason is very panicky. He's wearing a polo shirt. He's covered in blood. Normally, Jason is upbeat, happy, energetic, entrepreneur, trying to live the American dream, claims to hate the Chinese Communist Party, wants to start a bunch of businesses, make a lot of money, but he's downtrodden now and stained with blood and really, really wants to buy a gun. He's asking the contractor, how do I get a gun? And he says that it was because he'd had a falling out with Johnny Wu. Johnny Wu hasn't really been seen since June of 2023 after he helped these guys right up here around this corner get a illegal grow summit. From what we've been able to determine, they've been kicked out of the family for some reason, maybe insufficient loyalty to the Chinese Communist Party. You stop at a grow supply shop in Brewer or Augusta, anywhere, and ask them, have you seen this guy? Oh yeah, Johnny, what's Johnny up to these days? I haven't seen Johnny around in a little while. So he made his rounds, and Johnny was connected with dozens and dozens of these marijuana growing operations.
We're here at Nova Analytic Labs in Portland because we have some samples of triad weed that we're looking to get tested to see what kind of horrifying chemicals they've been spraying on their shit. The reason why I'm so interested in these Chinese-made fumigants, pesticides, fungicides, antimicrobials, is because they're so heinous, so toxic that you're not even allowed to make them, let alone use them in the United States. So the California EPA only found these chemicals because they brought in the National Guard's Weapons of Mass Destruction unit and had them do some testing on these chemicals. That's how they discovered what they were dealing with. We're dealing with a whole new level of toxicity, potentially making its way into the marijuana that Mainers consume.
They'll all contain these individual packets of sawdust. The pesticides are saturated in the sawdust. It's what's commonly seen as like an aluminum can, whether it's a beverage can or a food can. And then you'll see 2, 3, 4, 5, depending on how big the hooper is, the hoop house. You'll see multiple cans on the ground in the hoop house. So Once we get into the results of what these materials contain in regards to the pesticides, just know that not a single, when you look at one of these pesticides individually, not a single one is even approved for use as a fumigant, let alone a mixture of them being used as a fumigant. This is also one of the ones that the 95th CST identified for us, because the number one most commonly one found that we find at illegal grows. This is one to definitely keep an eye out for. This is one of the ones that was identified in the postal search warrant from the same sender address that was sending stuff to Maine, Maryland, and New York. So there were 13 pesticides identified total in the certified lab results. Out of the 23 pesticides that were identified in the samples that we sent to CST, 15 of them are not on anyone's list to test them. So I had to actually give this third-party lab, Alchemist, the list of pesticides that were identified, and they had to go out and find the standards for the ones they didn't have in order to do these tests. Two of the pesticides, phenobarbital and isoproparb, that have no approved use in the entire United States. DDDP, it's considered in California a toxic air contaminant. It's also listed on several safety data sheets, or just the chemical properties in general, listed as fatal if inhaled. What we don't know is what else is being generated. What are those decomposition products, thermal decomposition products that are resulting from burning multiple pesticides together?
We're about to go knock on the door of a home belonging to 32-year-old Wayne Yang, who was the recipient of some Chinese-made pesticides, according to the California Environmental Protection Agency. Looks like it was abandoned. Quick wrap up. Yeah, that's one where we should have talked with the neighbors first instead of afterward, because it turns out no one stays here overnight. According to the neighbor, they're there very, very early in the morning, and they dump out dehumidifiers, but no one stays there long term. And he said that there's usually 6 or 7 vehicles in the front yard. So this address would actually make sense to be, a center point for something to get shipped to, because there's no one there to be blamed if something, supposed to get like Chinese-made pesticides arrives there. But if there's 6 or 7 different vehicles there, that means that those Chinese-made pesticides could be distributed anywhere in the state of Maine, and probably are. All right, we just got the test results back from Nova Analytic Labs in Portland, and I have to say I'm not surprised by the results. In both instances, these samples failed for the presence of banned pesticides. Paclobutrazol is banned across the board for application on marijuana plants for a number of good reasons. One, it's carcinogenic, but two, it's also an endocrine disruptor. So someone who is consuming marijuana grown from these illegal marijuana grows that has paclobutrazol on it is unknowingly consuming something that can alter the way hormones work in their body. What we don't know is whether the banned Chinese-made pesticides and fungicides are also present in these samples. That's because these companies, the licensed cannabis testers in the state of Maine, don't even test for these chemicals because, again, they're banned for any kind of use. So if the Chinese-made illegal pesticides and fungicides being used as fumigants in California are also being used on these products, or any of the triad wheat being grown in the state of Maine, Maine's testing labs would have no way of knowing because they don't test for it. All right, we're here in Brewer, Maine, which is in the center part of the state, Penobscot County, just outside of Bangor. And this is a suburb, right across the bridge. By every appearance, it's a nice suburban community, but at a house just over this way on Washington Street, about 100 yards away, it was the scene of probably one of the biggest burglaries in the history of Brewer. Walking out that door. Hello. Hi, are you June? Yeah, we are doing reporting on a bunch of burglaries that have happened around here.
Yeah, this is.
You guys were burglarized? And you contacted the police?
Yes.
Yeah. Are you June or you June?
I am June.
You're June? Do you guys have any insight as to who might have burglarized you?
No idea.
No idea? Okay. Have the police followed up at all?
A little bit, not much.
Do they have any leads on who it might have been?
Wait, are you recording?
Yeah, we're reporters. Someone is robbing the Chinese Mafia. These are sophisticated break-ins. They found evidence of GPS trackers on vehicles, surveillance cameras, Wi-Fi jammers. So these people they know what they're doing. They know where they're breaking into. They know who they're victimizing. It's not me. I have an alibi. Thought about it. All of the people who have been burglarized are owners of Chinese food restaurants or Asian food restaurants. So not closing permanently, in case you were worried, good citizens of Brewer, Maine. The sign on the front says that they're closing temporarily because they've all got a big family trip back to the People's Republic of China. They're not just restaurateurs, but they also have connections with illegal marijuana houses. And in this case, there's a house in Brewer that was burglarized, and the individuals made off with, it's June, I think June's. The Four Seasons restaurant you see behind me, the owners of it were burglarized sometime this year. And right away, the owners didn't call the cops. It's been a bit of a mystery for the local police to unfurl why they wouldn't call the police. But when they started digging into the property records, they found that the owners of this place owned a bunch of properties throughout rural Penobscot County that all had the telltale signs of an illegal marijuana grow. So the suspicion is that their home was burglarized because someone or a group of people thought that they would be able to find the proceeds of the illegal drug operation. All right, now we're in Milford, Maine, a little bit north of Bangor on Route 2, very rural. And this is another property that's owned by June, who we were just speaking with, the owner of the Four Seasons restaurant, which is temporarily closed. This property is very obviously a marijuana grow. The electrical upgrades here all fit the same pattern. And they've taken the back license plates off their vehicles, which is another thing we've seen at a lot of these grows as they increasingly try to fly under the radar and prevent Maine law enforcement from catching up with what they're doing. But this would just be a confirmation that the burglary that happened in Brewer wasn't because they were looking for the chicken finger or crab rangoon profits, but looking for the profits of an illicit drug operation. In northern Maine, law enforcement believes that this is triad on triad violence. In other words, they think that Chinese mafia drug traffickers are picking off cash stashes, robbing each other essentially. But in the southern part of the state, law enforcement believes that it's Mexican cartels. What you see behind me is the remnants of 128 Weld in Wilton, Maine. This was one of the earliest marijuana grows that we visited when we started investigating. Are you guys still growing? He just doesn't want to talk to us. On May 1st, Friday, this building was lost. Total fire. The fires, Marshall hasn't had a chance to do an incident report yet or an investigation, but my guess is arson. The only question is, are we looking at triad on triad violence? Are we looking at vigilantism by Mainers who are upset with the fact that the state government isn't doing anything about the Chinese marijuana nemesis? Or was this potentially sabotage by a Central American cartel at war with the triads?
Oh, this is fucking gross. I'm definitely gonna have to throw these shoes away.
There's no way this fire behind me happened on accident. This facility has been operating for 8 years. You can tell by the level of sophistication of the electrical work on the outside and the inside that whoever wired this facility knew exactly what they were doing. This wasn't some random electrical fire. You can tell that it didn't start at the electrical boxes. And also, this facility wasn't licensed for any manufacturing, and there's no evidence of any hexane or butane tanks in there that would be used for the extraction of THC from marijuana leaf and marijuana bud. Everything here points toward an intentional act of arson to sabotage this facility.
This facility was large enough so that there were 8 separate grow rooms in it, at least 8. That means it could have been earning the triads, the Chinese Mafia, anywhere from $10 to $30 million a month. This was a massive, massive facility, and if it was, in fact, an arson, it could be the first step in the escalation of a war between rival transnational criminal organizations fighting over Maine's multi-billion-dollar marijuana market.
I do not think it's an exaggeration at all to say that were it not for Chinese participation, fentanyl would not be the massive problem it is in America today, because the drug cartels in Mexico would not have been able to set this up and operate in the manner that they have and the scale they have without that Chinese involvement.
Peter Schweitzer is perhaps the foremost American expert when it comes to the intersection between the Chinese Communist Party and Chinese criminal organizations. He's an award-winning author, the New York Times best-selling author most recently of Blood Money. It's a very interesting, shocking book that pulled the curtain back on how the Chinese Communist Party, which controls the Chinese government, is aiding and abetting the criminal organizations that are trafficking narcotics, primarily fentanyl, into the United States. They're responsible for killing hundreds of thousands of Americans every single year. Peter Schweitzer has documented it all.
I think one of the misnomers about the fentanyl trade in the United States is that this is essentially a Mexican drug cartel operation. Obviously, they're certainly involved. They profit enormously, but I think this was really set up with the help of Chinese criminal networks and entities in China like businesses. Really, it goes back to 2012, 2013, when these criminal networks, in a sense, explained to the cartel leaders, hey, the profit margins you were seeing on heroin and cocaine will be magnified 20 or 30 fold if you embrace fentanyl. And so there were certain criminal networks in China that have bragged about and have been acknowledged to have set up, for example, the Sinaloa cartel in the fentanyl trade.
What is the end game here for the Chinese government? What is their strategy? Is this just a money-making scheme for Chinese criminal groups, or is this part of a broader strategy that the Chinese government has to weaken and ultimately displace or destroy the United States?
Yeah, I mean, the thing we have to understand is sort of the strategic makeup that occurred from the 1980s to the present. For a very long time, really up until President Xi came to lead China, China's strategic posture was bide your time, bide your time. That's what Deng Xiaoping said. And he essentially said, like, look, China is weak. It needs to grow economically. It needs to enhance its capabilities before it can start confronting the United States or operating in a more aggressive manner. When President Xi became the leader of China, that posture changed. Had Chinese nationals in the United States in the 1990s or the early aughts that were not involved in any of this activity, but became more involved when the Chinese state became more bold in its challenge to the United States. And I think the timing that you speak of, this sort of surge in activity beginning in 2019 and 2020, corresponds to more broadly what we see happening with China, and that is the ramping up of what they call cognitive warfare. It's this notion that in the long term, they see this competition between the United States and China on a number of levels, not just in terms of missiles and tanks and military power, not only just economic power, but mental cognitive ability. And they believe this is an area where they can defeat the United States. And one component of this cognitive warfare is damaging the mental capacity of the United States through drugs, whether it be fentanyl, whether it be highly potent marijuana that might be laced with something else. So I absolutely think it is a linked effort, and the fact that you see it surge in such a manner over a period of time, I think is indicative of that fact.
Yeah, are you guys just doing upgrades, or are you turning the power off for this place? Oh, because it's an illegal marijuana grow.
Another detail that jumped out at us very early on from the property records was Quantic Bank. Looking at the Registry of Deed records in all of the counties in Maine, we saw time and time again, Quantic Bank, Quantic Bank, Quantic Bank. 131 Door Hill Road, Athens. Property purchased with a Quantic Bank mortgage. Electrical work done by J. Martin Vashon. 26 Gilman Road. This is another Quantic property. If you look at the historical record, they hadn't had much interest in doing mortgages for properties in Maine until about 2020. And it was around that time that the Congress passed a new round of funding for a program that's known as the Community Development Financial Institution. It's a U.S. Treasury Department program. And what the project was originally intended to do was help marginalized communities obtain access to home financing. What the CDFI program has become is a way for the Chinese Mafia to cheaply get mortgages and buy property in rural Maine. This is actually one of the more recent purchases. This is on the Bog Road in Leeds. This was purchased just in September by, according to the real estate records, Huan Ying Chang. And this is one of the 70 that we've identified that all used the same bank, Quantic Bank, in order to originate the loan. If you look at Quantic Bank's website, they openly advertise you do not have to be a U.S. citizen. You don't even really have to prove your identity. You don't have to show where gift money comes from that you use for closing costs. And you don't have to prove your income. I'd be remiss, though, if I didn't note that I'm standing here just a couple of miles away from 2 marijuana grows financed by Quantic Bank. And behind me, as you can see, a big electrical substation that services not only the wood pellet factory behind me, but probably a good deal of this part of Somerset County. They're kind of strange. Greenbush, Maine, and Penobscot County is a bunch of Chinese pot grows next to an electrical facility there. And on the other side of that electrical substation is Milo, where there's a bunch of similar facilities. So it's kind of starting to be a pattern. You know, just noticing things. Looking at the mortgage documents themselves, we learned that there were 2 loan officers who were involved in originating those mortgages. One was a guy named Stephen Ho.
At the time, Quantic's product line was very unique, and we were kind of like, the first one out to come out with this, with these unique products. We took a very strong marketing position to get loan. We were just focusing on our niche products that, you go fish where the fish are, I guess, right? Of course. As I did one and the client and a customer knew that, I can help them with their needs, they would refer another, and then that grows.
And the other was a woman named Ying-Chan Wang, who is a Chinese national who went to university in China.
Hi.
Hi.
What's up?
The reason I'm calling is because I've been reviewing some real estate records, and I see that you were the loan officer on about 20 to 30 separate loans that are in the state of Maine.
Yeah.
So, according to my investigation, those properties are actually being used as illegal marijuana growing operations controlled by Chinese foreign nationals. I'm wondering if you had any knowledge of that when you were originating the loans.
Oh, they were, really?
Yeah, they're actually on a Department of Homeland Security list flagged as controlled by Asian transnational organized crime.
Oh my God. Oh my God.
And I'm not alleging any criminal wrongdoing on Quantic Bank's part. They might have just been not asking too many questions, looking the other way, too busy counting the piles of cash that were stacking up at their feet. However, in the middle of all of this, as Quantic Bank is helping Chinese Mafia purchase properties throughout rural Maine that will later be converted into illegal cannabis farms, the CEO dies in a bike accident. It's kind of strange. Jeff Epstein didn't kill himself.
Thank you. My name is Steve Robinson. I'm the editor-in-chief of the Maine Wire.
Big winners of the 131st legislature, Planned Parenthood, solar panel manufacturers, and the Chinese Mafia.
If our laws were able to deal with the problem, then we wouldn't have had this vast conspiracy proliferate across rural Maine over the last 3 to 4 years.
Just wondering if we might save some of these questions for experts at the work session.
Well, that's a question for me. I would say I've visited more of these sites than anyone in the state.
It was a question directed to the chair. Thank you.
Liberal white women from rich towns in southern Maine, they didn't want to hear from me.
The 2 Malaysian citizens were not in possession.
Yes. I don't think this is germane to the bill. Thank you for your time.
I believe my question regarding their citizenship wasn't fully answered.
Yeah, and it won't be.
There were 3 bills introduced in the most recent legislative session. 2 of those were rejected by the Legislative Council, which is controlled by the Maine Democrats.
Make sure you tell the Maine liar I voted with you. Fails.
One of them was allowed in for consideration.
I think this is a clear and present danger. There are adversarial states in this world that do not like America. They don't like what we stand for, and they are kind of gaming the system.
LD 2204 was a bill from Representative John Andrews, a Republican from Paris.
It basically goes after organized crime, racketeering, with regard to scheduled drugs in the state. It would add penalties for aggravated cultivation, which already exists, and would also create a new statute for aggravated manufacture of scheduled drugs. It would bring into the state of Maine what are called Little RICO laws pertaining to, again, trafficking, manufacture, and distribution of scheduled drugs. It would allow prosecutors to trade up to get bigger fish as they go, and charged with one conspiracy for a bunch of crimes. People don't know exactly what they're buying, and it's also kind of throwing the market into flux for legal buyers, because we're having supplies that are coming from illicit sources. So the bill hopefully will go a long way to fixing that.
Eventually, Representative Andrews' bill was rejected. The House, with a bipartisan majority, voted it down, ought not to pass, and then the Senate killed it without even a single Republican in the state having the testicular fortitude to call a roll call vote. So this used to be the old Days lumber yard, a thriving Maine American business. You can see it right here with the outbuilding behind there. Its own power source, all the windows boarded up, telltale signs of a marijuana grow operation. And then their neighbors, just a little ways up the road, is the municipal building, the town hall. So they do not give a fuck about operating right next door to the seat of local government. A couple of weeks ago, the animal control officer had to show up at this property and take a border collie away because there was an Asian man in the front yard beating the shit out of it with a stick. The people of Woodville, they understood that this was a problem, but they didn't know what to do about it. We're at the town office. The marijuana grow is right over there. You can smell it. And the selectmen and some residents are inside talking about it with a member of the county government. They asked me what I would do about it. And being a journalist, not wanting to get involved in the situation, just merely cover what's happening, I told them that theoretically you could pass an ordinance that would allow your code enforcement officer to declare that facility an illegal cannabis business, and theoretically you could impose fines on it for operating as an illegal cannabis business, say $10,000 a day, and theoretically you could allow those fines to be filed as a lien against the property, and then use that as a basis to turn off the electricity. And then theoretically they would leave, because if they don't have electricity, they can't grow pot.
They all just a bunch of beer drinking, gun toting hillbillies up here.
Well, we are.
They say that like it's a bad, but they think it's a bad thing is the problem.
Manford liked my theory, so they passed that ordinance.
You give them notice. There's a period for them to comply. If they don't comply, they won't, because they're not going to check their mail. Then that fine starts stacking up, and once you get to $50,000, $100,000, then you send them a letter, let them know you owe us $100,000, and then you go to the power company, you go to the sheriff, and let them all know, hey, town of Woodville passed an ordinance, and these guys owe us $100,000 for violating our ordinances. Versant will kill their power. File an environmental complaint against them. File a fire complaint against them. Just wage bureaucratic lawfare against them, and enforce your ordinance.
I think the state of Maine is going to fight us every step of the way.
Let them pick the fight.
pick the fight. Who cares? Let them come up here and defend the right of Chinese illegal aliens to grow marijuana illegally.
If the transformer goes out with a hole in it, you ain't gonna report on that, are you?
I think it was a meteorite.
Okay.
It has been in place now, and they're trying to figure out how to enforce it against the multiple Chinese Mafia pot grows in the town of Woodville. Not a bad looking mallard. So we're leaving Cambridge, Maine now, and Cambridge doesn't have too many of these grows, but the reason why I'm interested in this place is because there's one in particular that's right next to a legal brewery that everybody in central Maine loves. I mean, my dad raves about this place. I just told the owner, like, he's probably drinking my inheritance away on their peanut butter stouts. Same pattern that we talked about. New transformer upgraded. You can see it in the front of the house. Used to have 100 amp service. Now it's got 400 amp service. All the windows are boarded up. You can smell the pot. He's been trying to get a THC infused beverage signed off on by OCP for the longest time. He's trying to play by the rules, do things the right way. He's a law-abiding business owner, and OCP is just putting him through the ringer, and he's dealing with financial services that don't want to touch him because it's cannabis. And right next door, you could smell it from his property, is a huge illegal Chinese marijuana grow. Triad weed is a term that the local marijuana entrepreneurs kind of came up with in reference to the product that was coming from Chinese Mafia. We've talked with dozens of people who invested hundreds of thousands of dollars trying to build a business based on the legal system that the state of Maine created. And now they're being totally undercut by Chinese Mafia.
We are entirely a medical cannabis facility. We're a cultivation site and an office. This deluge of product supply and demand. These people are growing illegally, not paying the licensing fees, not paying the taxes, but they're sending in a deluge into the supply. So instead of having, 1 pound of medical cannabis in the state of Maine, you have, 5,000 pounds of the price. It's that's going to drop way down.
The price was north of $15 a gram. Now it's collapsed by half.
For the small business owner, it's just a strangulation.
My name's Scott Willett. I am the owner of Up to Camp Edible Company and Golden Road Extracts.
Oh, you're a good boy. You don't get the shit beat out of you by some Chinese mafia gangster.
We're in like 100 locations or so, and so, with the extraction a little less.
What has your interaction with the Office of Cannabis Policy been like?
It's been like a roller coaster, and since the new director came on, it got even more difficult. Prior to, it was more of a guidance agency, and now it's more a lot less like, shut up and obey. And, there's no questioning decisions, it's just gotten really communist, I guess would be the word I'd like to put it.
You have a contract with Fireball Whiskey. You can't use Fireball's Dragon on your gummies, but they can use it on the little nips that are available in every gas station in the state.
Yep. And it just dictates the double standard that we're using, and I literally, the store's 100 yards away, and there's Fireball nips right next to the register. But the worst part about it is after all these hoops we jump through to find out that there's all these illegal operators out there not involved in the system in any way, shape, or form, and they're only policing the legitimate people.
Yeah. How much more money do you think you could be making if you did things the way the Chinese Mafia does?
A lot more. A lot more.
We're in Hills End, which is a 15,000 square foot internal grow. We grow everything inside. Now this room is almost ready to harvest. We have an auto watering system in here. We have a drainage system in this building that is able to handle this. We have humidity control. We have temperature control. We have light control. We have light intensity control by raising and lowering the lights due to pulleys. I grew up in Madison. My father was the high school principal for a time. We had a nice home, but somewhere down the line, it was one of the homes that was acquired by a group of Chinese nationals who converted it into a grow operation. And it pains me greatly to see that, my childhood home has been converted into a grow house. To be an honest player in this business is not inexpensive. We do testing locally for cannabinoid profile, mold, mildew, things of that nature. They have none of that. Well, all of those things cost money, and all of those things are expenses that they don't have to incur. This is not hard to put together. We do not need federal oversight. We need OCP to provide law enforcement with all of the allowable grow sites that are registered as part of the program. Provide that address list. And local law enforcement should be empowered to be able to go and see if the addresses that they believe fall into this category are on that list.
I was born in Madison, Maine, and joined the Army right after high school, and went to a couple wars, came back, and I wanted to get back to society, so I started Glory Gardens to get back to my fellow brothers. This is me. We all remember the state of Maine because it was all on the national news that we were actually the first company to get mobilized into an active war. I was convoy first defense, so I was the A gunner on top of every convoy that we had to travel out through and get shot at. So I was the first defense with a Mach 19, which is a grenade launcher on a machine gun. This is basically what I have to take on a daily basis, all from the VA, just to cope. Being in that field, you just have that embedded into your brain. You need to help people. You need to get back to society. And this is the only way that I could see on how to get back, because I saw the results of it helping people. Right now, I can't, with the Chinese selling for $450 to $600 a pound, I can't compete with that. I cannot compete with that. I mean, it costs me more to grow it. Basically have a $3,000 electric bill that all I could pay was $500 of. You saw two great big dehumidifiers on top of the ceiling that takes the moisture out, and it actually takes the moisture out from the air, puts it back into the water system, so nothing goes to waste. Everything
so you get a fully
here
self-contained
is all self-contained.
Yeah.
You can lose power at any time. So with a hydroponic grow, you lose power for more than a couple hours, your whole crop is dead. Because you need that water circulation, you need the lights, everything needs to be within parameter. So that's where you get a backup generator. 290 known illegal grows in the state of Maine that are all Chinese and not paying taxes. And here we are, the grower like me, I mean, being stomped out by the illegal Chinese that have 5 or 10 people growing in one house. What I had to do to jump through the hoops to get this place running. And it's not just something you can say, okay, I'm going to start growing next month and I'm going to be licensed. This took years to get started in order to make a facility like this. Years. So as you can see, the meter on the right is actually for the business. The meter on the left is for the house. So both of these circuits are completely separate. You're not going to see that in illegal grow. It's going to be one meter doing the whole thing. I think if you look all around you, the legal people that are growing are just throwing in the towel because they're paying out more than they're receiving. So that's basically what it's come to. So this is basically the last plead for help to put a stop. Let the legal people try and compete with the market and not get stomped out by the illegals.
The problem that Maine is dealing with ultimately boils down to fear. The residents of Maine our elected officials, our law enforcement are scared to confront the problem. Residents are scared to see something and say something. The Chinese Mafia is exploiting this fear. The Chinese Mafia is exploiting the lack of courage amongst the people of Maine. So ultimately, the real solution to this problem is courage. What it's going to take is for law enforcement and elected officials to step up and name the problem. This is Chinese Mafia. These are human traffickers. Human slavery is happening in this state. You need to say its name. You need to confront the enemy. We're dealing with evil here. You need to confront this evil, and you can't be scared about it. So they can pass whatever laws they want. The federal government can do whatever they're going to do. Ultimately, what we need, though, is courage. People of Maine need the courage to confront this problem, to name it, and to solve it for themselves. Am I a hero? No. I just hate communism.
All I see is you again. All I see is pain. All I see is pain. And in the morning when I open my eyes, it's never you. I wish it was you again. Daytime, nightmares, halfway. My eyes, all I see is you.